Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, colleagues. Welcome to today's discussion on political risks and blend finance, mobilizing capital for frontier markets. Can everyone hear me properly? Is the sound system good enough? Let me start by, on behalf of the organization, apologizing for the late start of this forum. The transportation had some issues, but we're still waiting for two more participants, which I guess are in the same queue. So I think we will have them join any moment now. As global investors continue to seek new growth opportunities, frontier markets are attracting increasing attention due to their strong demographic trends, untapped economic potential, and ongoing structural reforms. However, despite attractive fundamentals, many frontier markets continue to face challenges related to perceived political risk, currency volatility, regulatory uncertainty, and limited availability of long-term capital. In this context, blended finance and political risk mitigation instruments have become increasingly important tools for mobilizing private investment at scale. Uzbekistan itself presents an interesting example of this transformation. Over recent years, the country has undertaken ambitious reforms, strengthened engagement with international financial institutions, successfully accessed international capital markets, and significantly expanded cooperation with global investors. As the investment landscape evolves, the next challenge is not only attracting capital, but mobilizing larger volumes of long-term private investment in strategic sectors, such as infrastructure, energy, industry, logistics, and digital economy. This is exactly what we are going to be discussing here today, and this is exactly why this is so relevant. We will have representatives of Uzbekistan, of large financial investors, whether they are institutional or private, all working together to deploy capital to these countries, in particular also to Uzbekistan. Before we move to our opening remarks from our different guests, I would like to invite Mr. Yazur Kadshibayev, advisor to the Minister of Economy and Finance of the Republic of Uzbekistan, to share his insights outlining the government's perspective on the country's reform agenda and investment priorities. The floor is yours, sir.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. Assalamu alaikum, good day, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Thank you for inviting me to this panel session. It's both a privilege and pleasure to welcome you here today to discuss how to support private sector and how to mobilize private capital so that our growth is sustainable in a long run. Uzbekistan, under the leadership of His Excellency President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, aims to reach the GDP of $240 billion. I'm not sure. Okay. I think let's start with $200 billion by 2030. And to become upper middle income country, which most probably will happen soon. The government pursues this target through a broad range of economic and institutional reforms aimed at creating better business environment and ensuring accountability and transparency. I would not spend your time. I'm quite sure that you are familiar with the story. I will just share with you the most recent updates in the economic front. You can see that in Q1, the reforms under the leadership of President of Uzbekistan, His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev, already bearing the results. The GDP is growing in Q1 8.7%. Inflation is going down and sustainable 5.5%. I think in this, despite this global headwinds, despite this external environment, that shows that how sustainable we are and how we are committed to deliver the reforms and achieve the target. In June, Fitch put positive outlook, affirming sovereign credit rating at BB rate in less than 12 months when the Fitch upgraded us from BB minus to BB. It's quite rare when you have a straightforward upgrade to the one notch up, and then within the less than 12 months, you get another positive outlook. You understand that rating agencies are quite conservative, and it is quite difficult to get this score. But today, I would like to discuss with you, to draw your attention to how to mobilize private capital, because we want this success to be sustainable in the long run. We cannot base our success on fiscal intervention, so it should be private sector-led growth, and we cannot, giving the current saving rates, we think without external capital, we'll not be able to fuel our economy that is growing so fast. In this context, today's topic, multilateral guarantees, blended finance instruments, or export credit agencies, unlocking the private capital, external capital, is quite actual and hot topic. But I want to draw your attention to some challenges. First of all, it is about the cost of these instruments. We can use them only when they are competitive in comparison with other instruments, specifically with the commercial funding. As you know, as I mentioned earlier, sovereign credit rating of Uzbekistan has been upgraded 5 times over last 12 months. As in, the special task force led by the head of the presidential administration is leading this exercise to address the key bottlenecks and implement the reforms. Supported by the rating upgrades, Uzbekistan's sovereign spreads have tightened significantly and very close to the investment grade levels. For instance, currently Uzbekistan sovereign bond spreads in the secondary markets are approximately 120, 130 basis points over the benchmark. Very close to the Mexico, Hungary, and other BBB countries. That means that international investors who vote with their cash, actually expecting very positive credit trajectory. And taking into account this, I think accurate country-risk assessment and adequate risk premium are the keys for us to be successful in the long run. Institutional indicators are mainly perception-based in assessing the risks, but de facto significantly increase the cost. It's like, I would like to compare this with the inflation expectations. When you have de facto inflation approximately 5.5%, while inflation expectation is 10%. So for policy decisions, CPI expectations might be very important, but for the business, de facto CPI levels are crucial. That's why when the spreads approach to the investment grade levels and risk indicators continue to lag, the attractiveness of these instruments might be quite limited. Therefore, I think we should look at this discussion, and we are looking forward to hear from the panelists how to make sure that perception and de facto indicators are aligned, and what should be the government be doing, working with the rating agencies or overall IFIs, our partners, how to make sure that we are delivering this, and as a country setting up the good framework, addressing all the concerns of the potential investors to make sure that we are not overpaying and the cost is affordable. If you look to the sovereign credit rating methodologies, then you will find out that if you divide them into 5 pillars, economic pillar, monetary pillar, fiscal pillar, external pillar, and institutional pillar. We did our homework and we checked internally based on the methodology of all three rating agencies, S&P, Fitch, Moody's, And we found that in most cases, 4 out of 5 our fundamentals already aligned with the investment grade levels. And therefore, today is our task is, of course, to continue our reform agenda, address the bottlenecks. Of course, we should work together with our partners, private sector, to make sure that reforms are addressing the bottlenecks and the perception is aligned with the actual realities. And we are partnered up with the ADB, with the World Bank, with our other development partners, working together to make sure that all the compilers of the ratings are aware and perceiving all the latest information about the developments in the country. If I will very briefly talk about the way forward, we have His Excellency the President of Uzbekistan put an ambitious task to achieve investment grade before 2030. And we are very committed, and under the leadership of the special task force, we will be addressing and preparing a roadmap. It's a work in progress and implementing reforms to make sure that we are creating sufficiently accountable and transparent environment that will address all the concerns of the investors and that will allow us to minimize the cost of borrowings. And for instance, we are working with the OECD country risk classification as well, which is mainly based on the voting and perception of the ECAs. We are teaming up with the ECAs to make sure that we are not paying too high premiums, because when the premiums are too high and the commercial funding is on an investment grade levels, it will be very difficult to compete with this. I will stop here and thank you for coming, joining us, and we are looking forward to have a very interesting discussion ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We're gonna talk a little bit back at the end. I have some questions for you. I would now move to Mr. Francis Maligi. We did military service at McKinsey together. That's something in our background. You lead financial institutions business group at the EBRD. You are one of the largest, if not EBRD is the largest investor into Central Asia as a whole. Sometimes the European Union likes to call you to closer. Sometimes you are inside. Sometimes you are outside. There is always this interesting thought. But you clearly lead the supporting role in the supporting the private sector development and the financial sector transformations here in Central Asia. How has the perception of political and investment risk in frontiers market evolved over the last decade? And I will also let you expand a little bit. We can talk a little bit more, but I also will let you share some thoughts initially. Please, je vous en prie.
There you go. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Those of you who are at the back, I hate to see you stand. There's seats in the front. To your question. So we are indeed a European institution, but we're not an EU institution. If you want to talk about political risk, well, there was Brexit, and we stayed in London. So we're still London headquartered and happy there, but still focusing on emerging and frontier markets. I don't know if I'm just asking you to pass the next slide, or there's a clicker somewhere out there. Okay. Sorry about that. That's all right. Adaptability and agility is required in those times of geopolitical risk. Now, I'd like to share, in fact, the things that have not changed. I have not seen things change over the past decade, and then what has changed. So what I call the foundations is, the first one is actually something I highly encourage. I'm very happy to see people in person here. I highly encourage anybody who wants to invest in frontier markets to actually go there, because risk has an inverted perspective in the sense that the further out you are, the larger it looks. So you're sitting in London and you're saying, oh my God, frontier markets, it's so risky. And then you come here on the ground, you set up an office, we have close to 70 people here in the BRD in Tashkent, and you realize that it's actually not so bad and there's a lot of things you can do. So inverted perspective is very important. The investors that understand that outperform those that do not. The second thing is that the need for transparency, predictability, good governance, a level playing field between private and state players, and when you invest in equity markets or in debt markets, liquidity, all these are important factors that have been there, are still there, and will still be there in the future. So a government like you've described, that has a clear strategy for governance reform, a clear strategy for where it wants to take the country, and delivers on it consistently, attracts much more investment. Now, quickly, what has changed, in fact, is that we live in a much more dangerous world. I don't want to go into geopolitical tensions too much, but we live in a world where violence among nation states is now something we need to take into account. Something that perhaps we had forgotten about, especially in continents like Europe. War was something of the past and so on. Now we need to take it into account, and that's a big change over the past 10 years. Trade and supply chain disruptions, not just Liberation Day, but all sorts of different ways of looking at economic sovereignty, critical material sovereignty, financial sovereignty, and so on, are things that are coming back to the forefront. On the positive side, what has changed is the data quality and availability, and it's linked to what I call the great 2010s yield chase, where the yields were very, very low in advanced markets, and so people came here also in search of yields. And I don't want to steal any of Marius's thunder, but for example, the fantastic listing of the USNIF plays to this data quality and availability, because you're putting the country on a map in a very different way once you list companies on a reputable stock exchange. And so, in other words, now we have investors that had a very simple statement maybe 10 years ago, frontier markets are too risky, and now we see frontier markets are investable, where governance, transparency, and reform direction are credible. So those are, I think, the key things that I've seen change. I'll talk later about the instruments.
And how do you see, from your BRD's experience here in Central Asia, the key obstacles still preventing this larger scale mobilization? So if we were to really want to boost these capital markets, really want to boost the presence here, what would be your recommendations, what would be your messages for countries like Uzbekistan, and also, so that we take it the two sides, what can the region, other countries around here learn from Uzbekistan? Because Uzbekistan has been a very interesting source of reforms in these last few years.
So I would say first, Uzbekistan has a lot to be proud of. It is a country that has managed to put itself on the map of global investors in a fairly short amount of time, in a very convincing way. And the second thing I'd like to say to that is, of course, there's still progress to be made. I focus on the financial sector. It is clear that the financial sector is not in an ideal state. It is still very dominated by state-owned banks. Private sector banks are too small. There's no significant listing of any bank in the country. There's indirect listing through USNIF, but that's all there is for now. And so there is margins for progression. If you want investors to come, well, you need to build an investment base. And so there's a few things out there. One is listing more companies, developing capital markets, developing local savings institutions, including life insurance, pension funds, and so on and so forth. Because my experience from many countries, emerging countries from Europe and elsewhere, is that large investors typically come once you have a vibrant market. So countries who think that they will create a vibrant market by inviting the likes of Franklin Templeton and Fidelity and so on and so forth are not going to be very successful unless they also make the effort to create their domestic investor base. That is something that is still on the way ahead for Uzbekistan. With a young, growing population, it is actually the time to do it. Don't make the mistake that European countries made to create pension systems that don't take into account demographic factors. You have the luck to have a large number of workers per pensioner. So this is the time now to develop modern and efficient capital markets in a country, and that's certainly something that EBRD can help with.
Thank you so much. I would like to bring Marius Dan, who's the CEO of Central Asia for Franklin Templeton. Of course, I'm not going to introduce Franklin Templeton. Pretty much everyone I think around the room knows you very well. You also have a very successful case here in Uzbekistan. You've been deploying a lot of capital into the country. Let me ask you, how do your institution and other global institutional investors see Uzbekistan and the wider Central Asian region?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. In my position as CEO of Central Asia and Romania, I run the National Investment Fund of the Republic of Uzbekistan. This is a vehicle that we created together with the government of Uzbekistan, specifically the Ministry of Economy and Finance, a year ago, by injecting significant minority stakes into some of the largest state-owned companies in the country. So we have 13 assets. It's a diversified fund. We own state-owned companies in the transportation sector, in the infrastructure sector, energy and utilities. As Francis mentioned, we own the third largest bank in the country in the portfolio, the water supply asset, the commodity exchange, the third largest insurance in the country. So we created a very attractive vehicle by pooling these assets together to give institutional investors exposure to some of the most dynamic sectors in the local economy. We launched the fund on the 1st of May 2025. Prior to that, we as Franklin Templeton opened an office in Tashkent in May. We hired a terrific team of more than 20 people at this stage, and our focus is right now solely on managing the National Investment Fund of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Within 12 months since we started and since the fund was operationalized, we successfully completed the initial public offering of the National Investment Fund on both the Tashkent Stock Exchange as well as the London Stock Exchange. This was the first international transaction, equity transaction from Uzbekistan. We raised close to $700 million for the selling shareholder, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, from global investors. We had significant oversubscription of the transaction. We had a $3 billion book of demand. We had very strong cornerstone investors. Franklin Templeton, as the entity, participated as a cornerstone investor. We had BlackRock, we had Red Wheel, and we had a family foundation. So outside of the cornerstone investors committed $300 million to the deal. Outside of the cornerstone tranche, the oversubscription of the transaction was close to 7 times. And this is for a pool of state-owned companies from Uzbekistan in the first transaction coming out of the country. So what we managed to do, together with the Ministry of Economy and Finance, together with the government of Uzbekistan, by successfully completing this IPO, is nothing short of a miracle. It's pretty much unheard of in capital markets to do a transaction like this in such a short period of time, which tells you a couple of things. One, of course, it helps that we bring to the table a very strong track record in managing a similar vehicle in Romania for the past 15 years, which is a fund that I also oversee. That has returned over 15 times in the share price. We paid out to shareholders over $7 billion through various distributions. So we had a very strong commitment from those investors that did really well with us in Romania, who are very keen to support me and the team in Uzbekistan as well. But it's not about us, it's not about our track record. Ultimately, what investors participated and why they invested in this transaction is because of what is happening here on the ground. And Jasur mentioned, marrying perception and reality. a lot of times with frontier markets, and I've seen this firsthand in Romania, perception usually is far worse than the reality on the ground. And getting people here in events like this, we also did a major investor day in October of last year, getting investors to come to Tashkent, to come to Uzbekistan, to see the state-owned companies, to talk to the Ministry of Economy and Finance, to talk to other stakeholders in the government, to interact with the management teams of the state-owned companies goes a very long way to marrying that perception, and for people to realize that actually the reality on the ground is far, far better. Because what has been, I've been coming to Uzbekistan, I should mention this, I've been coming here since 2018. This was the first time I came and discussed with the government the idea of creating the National Investment Fund. Back then it was too early because there were many other reforms that needed to take precedence, but we did it. We created this fund and we showed that there is very strong equity investor interest for assets coming out from Uzbekistan. But for us, of course, this is not a destination. This is a very small stop in the lifetime of the fund because our mandate is quite broad. Our key focus and how we're going to deliver value and how we've already delivered value for investors is by focusing on the transformation of the state-owned companies. And we have very clear strategies and what we need to do to improve efficiency, to improve profitability, and to also bring a number of our portfolio companies to the market. So now that we've successfully completed our IPO, the plan is to launch a few additional transactions from our portfolio. As soon as next month, we will be hiring equity advisors and then underwriters, and then coming to the market over the next 12 and 24 months with certain companies from the fund, specifically the telecom business, the hydropower business, the power transmission asset, and hopefully, as Francis said, any good capital market ecosystem needs a strong bank to be listed. We have SQB in our portfolio. EBRD and other IFIs have been working very closely with SQB, and we view that as a very good candidate for a transaction at some point in time. So what I want to end with in my remarks is that now that we've completed our IPO, there is very strong momentum for Uzbekistan. The reform process at the government level is accelerating. The transformation process at the portfolio companies level, which we are in charge of, is accelerating. We've already made, we've taken a huge step in overhauling the board of directors of the state-owned companies to such an extent where now independent directors have a majority in 12 out of 13 assets in the fund. When you think about that, that is very unique, and that is also a very clear sign of commitment from the government of Uzbekistan that transformation needs to happen, improvements need to happen, and then successful IPOs need to take place. So I'm very excited about what is ahead for Uzbekistan. We at the National Investment Fund and at Franklin Templeton have a lot of work to do, but I cannot think of a better market in frontier markets to be in today than Uzbekistan.
Thank you. Marius, I will thank you very much for that intervention. I will come back to you a little later. I wanted to bring from far aside here, exactly opposite to me, Irakli Elashvili. He's the Deputy CEO of Ipoteka Bank, OTP's group investment here. And I wanted to jump to you as a continuation of what Marius was saying, OTP being largest bank in Central and Eastern Europe, with a lot of experience working throughout those markets. Actually, Marius not very successful in Romania, but very successful in all the other countries, and made an amazing deal here in Uzbekistan, a very successful integration. Georgia, where you come from, is also one of the countries which in the former Soviet space has a more advanced financial system. How has this experience of integration into the OTP group How has that made the Ipoteka Bank stronger, and how do you see the prospects of the financial and the banking market here in Uzbekistan? Please.
Thank you very much for the question. Hello, dear listeners. It's a very good question. So I'll tell you, briefly tell you about OTP entering the market. So Ipoteka's privatization was, as many of you know, was the first privatization in the banking industry. In 2023, OTP acquired majority stake in Ipoteka and started the massive transformation of a very large banking institution, predominantly a mortgage bank. And I think becoming part of OTP brought many new things besides obviously the equity investment and the proceeds that were paid to acquire a majority stake in the bank. First of all, I think this is the big brand name. We're the first EU-based bank in Uzbekistan, and this brings a lot of credibility to the market, brings a lot of expertise, and our relationships with IFIs, international investors, with various sort of international companies has improved massively. We implemented OTP standard risk management practices. This is extremely important in the market where you bring new standards and follow the strong reforms that are already being implemented continuously in the market. This is a very fast-paced market in terms of companies growing, they adapting to new international standards, going to the capital markets, and you have to be constantly ahead of the curve, able to support some of the blue chip companies in Uzbekistan. OTP itself, this is for OTP, this is a very interesting market where last year we managed to issue the first Eurobond from a private institution. As you very well know, Uzbekistan is a very strong market, already a strong DCM market, lots of Eurobonds issued, but last year was the first issuance out of Uzbekistan by a privately owned institution. Obviously, OTP brand helped a lot, but this was mainly the Uzbek story that attracted investment basically into the bond. During the roadshow, we didn't have to pitch too much about Uzbekistan because all the institutional investors know the country, know macroeconomics, understand it, and are very attracted to this market on the debt capital markets side, and obviously with the Uziniv's recent success on the equity capital market side as well. Now, having said that, I mean, you mentioned Georgia as well. I think the banking market is relatively, I would say maybe if it's a right word, young, compared to some of the other markets that have started development of the banking industry. I'll bring simple statistics. So if you look at the credit penetration to GDP compared to other markets, both on retail lending as well as corporate lending, they are way lower in Uzbekistan than in other markets. This makes Uzbekistan very attractive for banks and financial groups. This means that there is capacity to increase credit and finance to consumers, to companies, and we expect that the banking market will grow relatively fast. I think the growth pace in Uzbekistan compared to other comparable markets is significantly higher in terms of total asset growth, loan growth, and access. This is much speeded up by the very strong access to international capital markets. Now you have several banks in the market who are Eurobond issuers. You have the first example of a successful IPO in the market, and this gives future opportunities to many other players in the space.
And the question I have to ask you, because many people in the audience will have the same question, is Uzbekistan the first of some other investments in Central Asia for OTP?
It is first, and I'll say it's not the last, but it's probably the most attractive from a banking market perspective and the opportunity to grow. We've seen massive success so far from the transformation that we have implemented. As of Q1, we showed our results. This is public information. We're already the most profitable bank in the market. I mean, we obviously, the target is to make this sustainable and the growth sustainable, but we have demonstrated that reforming and transforming a large bank is possible, and this is a very attractive market where international investors should have a strong appetite. And yes, we're looking at other investments in the region. As you know, OTP is a very acquisitive bank. We grow both through organic and inorganic growth. I do not exclude that we do additional acquisitions in the market region.
Thank you, Irakli. I had my journalist push me to see if we would have some M&A news coming out of this conference today, but you just gave us a very positive outlook for the future. No concrete steps. I will take that as your answer. We were joined by all our panelists in the meantime, so we're going to continue our discussion. Mark, you are the CEO of AKA Bank from Germany. We are going to move a little bit the discussion with you and Christiana to another place. How do you see this bridge between Uzbekistan and your institutions? How do you think that you can help mobilize greater volumes of private capital? And from a commercial perspective, what do you think are still the main risks for larger financing flows into markets like Uzbekistan? Mark, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, first of all, I mean, maybe to mention that AKA is a specialized financial institution that really focuses very strongly on export trade and nowadays more and more as well on syndicated finance here. And we are present in this market already for, pretty active for 10 years, so pretty long time already. And I think Yazur mentioned it. So one of the aspects I think that has an important factor, not only in the past, but will be as well in the future, is really mobilizing, for example, the ability to grant more cover from the export credit agencies. And in that regard, Yazur, just to take it up, I think what you mentioned and then fully understand is an important objective, is really to improve not only the international ratings by Fitch and what you refer to, but also to basically look into the OECD rating perspective. Because the OECD rating then will directly really address the cost of the financing. And I think it is maybe if I may talk a little bit about what is political risk and what are the risk components. And don't forget that political risk in general is a driver as well for country risk. And in a commercial institution, country risk is obviously driving as well limits. And so it's always good to have instruments whereby you can either address directly political risk or maybe even at full scale political and economic risk. And that is done directly by export credit agencies as being one example to tackle with the issue. And I think if it comes to Uzbekistan, we saw the splendid development that has been taken as well in addressing certain components of political risk. And I would like to address one thing which I think is important. Thank you. Yeah, okay. This is really a fantastic organization, if I may add. If I just give you one, maybe just to, what kind of technology is that? Ah, yeah, just as a background. And what I think has to be mentioned in the regard of Uzbekistan, for example, is that we see a country that managed the currency risk very well. And currency risk, obviously, aside of transfer risk, currency risk, I think, is an important component as well in terms of the political risk. And Yazur, you will know it better, but I think the stability for the currency probably came as well at a certain price in terms of competitiveness. But the country decided stability maybe over competitiveness, which I think is, at least from the risk perception, has been a very, very good route. Yeah.
And how do you see German companies looking at Uzbekistan? You were going to go to Italy, very different cultures, very different adaptations sometimes. But really, how do you see and how do you feel German business community looking at as Uzbekistan today?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last Uzbek-German Economic Forum here in Tashkent has shown that there's a very positive trend, first of all. Secondly, I think you have to keep in mind, and that we have to address it more often as well in the context of German companies, because it's not too well known. But one very important factor is that Germany offers a fantastic instrument in order, again, to cover political risk by providing a political risk insurance or investment guarantee scheme. And that investment guarantee scheme covers political risk to the full extent, and therefore is highly interesting for the investor. And it even, one has to say, it even covers as a very comprehensive cover, even including war and terror risk, which by chance has to become, or did become, important in the context of Ukraine. And in that region, for example, it is a very interesting and important instrument as well to make the step to invest in a country much easier for the German investor. And I must say it comes at a very, to be honest, a very low and attractive pricing. So it is really an incentive to easier invest. And I think overall, I'm expecting that the interest in this frontier market is, when we talk about it maybe a bit later, but it is increasing. It is increasing because of certain geopolitical developments. And therefore, the interest will as well be increasing from the German side above the level that it has reached so far. I'm pretty sure.
Dankeschön. Christiana, buongiorno. Good to have you with us. The EU and Italy, Prime Minister Meloni was here last year, a very successful visit. And Europe has also been put a lot of political weight. We had in Samarkand the first EU Central Asia summit. How do you see Italian companies? And so exactly, I will pick up first on the last question, so that to also have the Italian company perspective. Italy also a big buyer of energy from the wider region, of course, not from Uzbekistan. So the links, for example, with the new member of C6 for Italy are very strong in the case of Azerbaijan. But how do you see the appetite and the willingness for Italian companies to invest and to be more present, and in particular in the financial sector, where Italy does have some very also relevant banks in play?
So thank you very much, and okay, let me sorry for being late, but it was a little bit complicated to get to arrive here. So probably later on I will use my slide, my presentation, but what I can, oh no, okay, perfect, easier. So it's, my name is Cristiana Portale and I'm working in SACE, and SACE is the Italian Export Credit Agency. I am the head of Hub Europe, CAEs and Ukraine. What we can say that is that the Italian companies are very active and very interesting in investing and in export in Central Asia and in Uzbekistan in particular. And we, as an export credit agency, are ready to support Italian exporter, Italian companies in their supply, in their commercial transaction. And we support them through a wide range of financial tools, financial and insurance solutions, but we will see a little bit later. And of course, the relationship between two countries, Italy and Uzbekistan, is more strong, and that is demonstrated also by the bilateral meetings and we held last year during the visit of our Prime Minister Meloni, and we believe that this strong relation can be increased more significantly because Uzbekistan is a country, is a developing country that has a very large numbers of investments, and Italian companies can make an important role in different sectors.
Thank you. And how do you think Central Asia can continue to attract greater investment from international investors supporting by ECAs? So, what would be your recommendations for the region, for Uzbekistan, to enhance their attractiveness at this moment?
Generally speaking, the key factor is bankability, because today we want to demonstrate that the cooperation, the partnership between several institutions like Export Credit Agency, Commercial Bank, Multilateral, DFI can make the real difference. Because in frontier markets like Uzbekistan, like Central Asia, the issue is not the lack of opportunities, but the gap between potential and investability. And this is where institutions like Export Credit Agency, that SACE is one of them, can make a difference through guarantees, financial insurance, risk-sharing solutions. The Export Credit Agency can help reduce political and commercial risk and make projects more attractive for lenders and investors. And that's what we can do together. And I believe that in Uzbekistan there are a lot of potentiality and opportunities, and working together we can support companies to invest and to be present here.
Grazie, Cristiana. We have with us Sheikh Mansour bin Khalifa Al Thani from the state of Qatar. The Gulf has become a big presence in the investor landscape worldwide. We've heard a lot of European angle in this conversation so far, but Gulf investors have really been active in this part of the world as well. How do you see, what makes it attractive for Gulf investors, Central Asia in general, Uzbekistan, and how have you experienced and how have these investors gone about actually putting money on the ground and executing projects in this country? Sheikh, please.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us, and I would like to put a strategic note. Our leadership in Uzbekistan, our leadership in Qatar and Uzbekistan is being very forward-thinking and very unique, and I think they put the foundation and the stability for investors to come. So I think this is the real foundation of the foundation. When the leadership has a clear strategy and has a clear vision, and the whole country is following. that create confidence and create trust and create reliabilities. And I think that's why all of us are here, because we see the stability, we see we can have confidence, we can have trust on the ecosystem. And also what I realized the reform, the power of reform of Uzbekistan is really incredible. That really encouraged us to invest and focus on finding the opportunities that already exist. Today, with the stability, with the confidence, we are much more likely to invest more and discover more opportunities. One more thing about Uzbekistan, I think, is the talent, the availability of talent. It's the mother home of amazing scholars, Al-Ghorithmi, Al-Tirmidhi, Al-Bukhari. They are really very popular scholars who changed the whole world. So the talent DNA is there. So that's really encouraged us to invest, because we see a stability, we see a clear forward thinking, and we see certainty in value creation. This is really what really makes us focus and invest in Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Sheikh. Let me give a provocation to the whole row, maybe starting back in Francis and then one after the other. I'm going to ask you three things and short answers so that we can have a lively discussion around here. First, I'll make a statement and I'll want to see whether you agree with me or not. It's a relative statement, but it's an important one. Central Asia today presents one of the best risk rewards in terms of investments in the world. Do you agree or do you disagree? Second is one key learning from this region to other frontier markets, and so something that the rest of the world can learn from this region. And the third one is, what is the most important thing that the government of Uzbekistan, and at the end I'll give Yasur's a chance to react to your recommendations, one thing the Uzbek government should be focusing more on. Not that they're not focusing on, but they need to be focusing more. So, the risk reward, one lesson, one recommendation.
You know, the world is a pretty big place. So we only cover 43 countries at EBRD. But in that region of 43 countries, yes, certainly it is. I mean, Central Asia has a lot of opportunity. What is missing a bit is scale, though. These are relatively small economies still. And so I hear a lot of investors focusing on places like Turkey, places like Egypt, and so on, which are larger markets. But in terms of risk reward for your euro invested, if you do it well, you know, and there's no, by the way, there's no DFI, de-risking instrument that is a substitute for a good project. All right. So when you have a good project, you will make it work, and we're there to help you. And by the way, we de-risk by co-investing. Our results in terms of credit results in our investments are much better than the average for at similar rating in a commercial world. So there's lots of opportunities. Things that what was your second question?
A recommendation and a learning from here.
Learning from here is that well, I say nothing is impossible. You know, there was a lot of people were quick to write off this region when the Soviet Union collapsed. And in fact, it has seen some of the most interesting success stories. But you need to keep at it. You need to be bold in your reforms. And you need to, actually, when you start your reforms, you don't start with half measures. You start with full measures. And one thing that the government could focus on, well, we have privatization on the agenda. But then I think the battle for, and you mentioned talent, Sheikh, but the battle for talent is never won. Because the level of talent that is required to compete in tomorrow's world is, again, different from the one that was required today and yesterday. And so any government, and that includes those in this region, needs to invest in its population, bring them back home, or keep them home, so that they can build the country of the future.
Merci. Marius, please.
From my perspective, you know, I think from an equity investment, you need to dig deeper into the region because the risk reward is certainly different. Uzbekistan, from my perspective, has the best risk reward opportunity. Given the listing of the fund, given the upcoming listing of the underlying portfolio companies. And by the way, we listed 3 weeks ago. The share price of the fund has increased between 25 and 30% on both the London Stock Exchange and the Tashkent Stock Exchange. And we attracted quite a lot of retail demand in the local market, more than all the IPOs combined together. So the population of Uzbekistan did get access to this transaction, and they did really well. And I think it's a great lesson for the future IPOs coming out from our portfolios as well as from the private sector. Then a lesson that can be learned, I think a lot of governments around the world can learn from the way that the government of Uzbekistan operates. The hours and the commitment of government officials working late hours, working during the weekends to make sure that reforms are done in a timely basis, that's something that many governments should look at. And then a recommendation would be to continue the transformation process, the reform process, and the improvement in the regulatory framework. From our perspective, of course, energy is very key. We're working very closely on the regulatory framework changes there because it's a big value creation opportunity for the fund. So accelerating those will go a long way in showing the world, showing the global institutional investor committee, the global institutional investor community, the commitment that the government of Uzbekistan has in the reform process.
Mark, please.
Yeah. Risk return. Let me say, looking back, first of all, I said it before, we looking back to transactional experience from roughly 10 years. So has been absolutely flawless. Yeah. And looking back so far, I think risk return has been very good. I think at the moment, things change slightly with view as well to the positive development. There are many more entrants into the market from a lending perspective. And as you can imagine, that creates pressure as well on pricings. So, I mean, looking more at a yield or from a yield perspective, at the moment it's not becoming easier, to put it nicely. And therefore, I think the reward is a bit of a mixed emotion, I think, at the moment. Recommendations. I think from what we saw as well by Yamur on this overview there's one aspect I think that has to be worked on, and you allow me to say something that is maybe not so easily taken, but I think the bankruptcy index is too high, and is something where I see as well the country really has to work even more stringent on. It's an important factor from my perspective. And I think just maybe adding one other thing from an industry perspective, I think one has to further build on an industry creating products that can be marketed more on a global scale. Yeah, we see still a lot dependence on natural resources, and I think it's more trade with the neighboring countries, and I think one has to view how can we generate next level in order to be as well competitive from a global scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Cristiana, prego.
Yes, we already said that Central Asia is becoming increasingly strategic for Italian, but not only Italian, for European companies. And we are seeing a strong momentum across several sectors. Energy, infrastructures, metallurgic, mechanical, but also in agribusiness and processing, food processing. Uzbekistan is a very good example of this trend. The country is in a rapid phase of industrial development with strong demand for technology, engineering capabilities, industrial know-how. The country has a very young population and a very stable economic and political situation. So the growth is also reflected in bilateral trade and bilateral relationship between the countries, and Italy and Uzbekistan are an example of that. And as such, we are very focused on the country, and our current exposure reflects this. We already supported more than 400 million transactions, especially in buyer's credit transaction. And let me give you some concrete examples. We supported Pietro Fiorentini for the supply of gas meters in a gas distribution modernization for an amount of around 220 million. And we support Wood Italiana for with a transaction of 120 million for engineering for chemical plants. And we also supported Danieli Officine Meccaniche in the expansion of a metallurgical complex. But what's really very important is the pipeline that for future opportunities. And we are seeing opportunities in infrastructure projects, logistic corridors, energy system, and also critical raw materials that are very, very important for Europe at the moment. So all these are the sectors and the opportunities that we can see in the country.
Thank you, Christian. Sheikh, please.
First
Shall I
question-
remind you the questions? So,
Yeah.
risk reward, recommendation, and a lesson from the region.
Yes. My first answer is yes, I think there is a great reward, manageable risk, and a clear opportunities ahead. So, as you mentioned, the first question, yes or no, so yes, I think it's a great opportunities and a great reward with manageable risk, with the stability in the vision and the continuous reform. The lesson that I really impressed me is the country's ability of reform and transformation in this speed, where it became, I think, one of the fastest country in the world, the fastest growing country in the world as Uzbekistan. Of course, Central Asia is a great hub also, but Uzbekistan demonstrated an amazing performance so far. What always need to be looked at is talent. Actually, I'm very passionate about talent and the quality of talent and the power of talent. I think the future economy is all about the quality of your talent and how talent can really create the economy for you, not anymore just the resources. We are in an era of AI. We are in the era of beyond the knowledge. I think knowledge, we've been talking about the knowledge economy for the last 35 years. I think now we are in version 2 at least. I won't say it knowledge economy anymore unless I add to it version 2. So it's next generation knowledge economy, which is really based on talent and the quality of talent and the way they work in an ecosystem. So working on the ecosystem, evolving the ecosystem, talent-based, regardless of the industry. So the industry is so important, but what makes it more important is the ecosystem and the quality talent behind the ecosystem of that industry. And I think Uzbekistan is doing a great job on that thing, but my recommendation is still do more on that and do more PPP, because public-private partnership can empower the knowledge transfer, can empower the talent, and can create an awesome economy, actually, because it is bringing the global talent to the local talent mixed with the government support. That's what really PPP is engaging the global private sector and the local private sector with the government to move faster and with more resilience. So that's my observation.
Thank you, Sheikh. Irakli, I know if I ask Laszlo Wolf on the deputy CEO of OTP Group, he will say this is probably one of the best deals that, so in terms of risk reward for OTP, it was a very good one. But your takes, please.
I would definitely agree. And I would say even more that I think, in my personal view, Uzbekistan is the best risk reward country in the world today. I mean, in today's world, I think, and this has been witnessed by a very strong appetite of debt investors in Eurobond market and equity investors in the recent UZNIF IPO. Specifically about OTP, it has been a very strong return on investment deal for OTP. Again, I mean, there are future upcoming bank privatizations, which again should be looked closely. But for OTP itself, we've had a strong return on investment results so far, and we only see upside from here. In terms of I don't know, the recommendations maybe to investors is very practical recommendation: come talk to us, come meet your counterparts, investors who have already invested and are present in the market. There are a few very strong associations, European Uzbek Business Association, AmCham. They're very strong on a daily basis. We see very many international investors, large companies, multinationals coming to this market. So definitely come talk to investors who are already present. And the banks, obviously, we as a bank, we're more than happy to sort of look to see how we can finance your needs locally. Another recommendation, I think, maybe to the government is just to keep up a very good work on the reforms. I think Uzbekistan has done a stellar job on this. It's very rare in the world where government works 24/7, and on a regular basis you see improvements, new ideas, new opportunities, and I think this is it's very tough to keep this up on a long-term basis, and I think it would be a challenge, I'm sure. But if this continues, I think Uzbekistan will transform on many levels, economically, talent-wise, business. Very many sectors are growing extremely fast, in my view, especially when you compare it to the rest of the world. Another recommendation is, and this works really well in Georgia, attract Uzbek talent who work abroad, but not only to the government positions. I think it's very important that this talent returns to private sector, and you know, maybe I'm mistaken, but I haven't seen this on a massive scale yet. I've seen a lot of very bright professionals return to government, and this was the first basically wave of talent return, if you will. But I think the private sector will really appreciate this talent, and there are lots of very smart, experienced Uzbeks working out there in developed markets and in the sectors that are sort of booming here. I think I answered all the questions.
Thank you very much, Irakli. Yeah, so we didn't organize it this way, but you just heard the best in the world. So Irakli put the bar pretty high. Also great set of recommendations for the government. What are your thoughts and reflections on everything you heard?
Thank you, Pedro. First of all, once again, thank you for sharing your thoughts and praising the government of all the achieved results. It's a big honor. It's a pleasure. Let me react to some comments, to some statements. I think, first of all, what we are doing to improve the credibility, let me start with that and then reaction some. We're trying to be transparent, we are trying to be accountable, we are trying to be very open to all discussions as the ministries, the government in general. We are having a number of different initiatives. For instance, we are joining the IMF Special Data Dissemination System from GDDS, the General Data Dissemination System. We are having investor days. We are participating in, for instance, a number of matching, institutional matching, business matching events. We are very open. We are trying to deliver what's going on in Uzbekistan and what are the risks associated with Uzbekistan, so that investors have a very clear understanding what to expect when they are here and what will be the risk reward. In my understanding, if I will switch, The recommendation was to keep up with the reforms. This is, I think, under the leadership of President of Uzbekistan, I think we'll continue because we have very high ambitions. And we need to catch up with these ambitions for the sake of population. We're trying to avoid, minimize all the risks associated with the fiscal stance, with the contingent liability management. We have very clear understanding on that. And that's why we are prioritizing investing heavily in mobilizing private capital, not rely on fiscal side only. Now some reactions, if I may, regarding the risk reward. If everyone here saying we are having the risk reward is good, that means maybe we are overpaying. Maybe we need to catch up with the realities on risks as well. And for that, we need to work together. Maybe, of course, it's not just a perception. We are making sure that our ratings are barometers of real situation in Uzbekistan, where the government tries to address all the bottlenecks and create very friendly environment, good environment for the business. Because we see a private capital to lead the growth. But sometimes, as I said in my opening remarks, some changes, some indicators are lagging. It's because they are perception-based, how to measure those risks, political, institutional risks. That's why we need to team up with you guys. I believe, for instance, OECD country risk classification, I think, you know that no methodology is published. We don't know how it is assessed. It is just voting mainly. And we are reaching out all the ECAs. We are ready to collaborate so that if we make sure that risks in Uzbekistan are properly reflected in the country risk classification, it will ease to expand the transaction in Uzbekistan as well, because the premium will be lower. That means you will have more competitive pricing, and competitive pricing is quite important. You should compete with the commercial borrowing, commercial lending, and if it's not competitive, then there is no room for that. So we are ready to team up. We are ready to make presentations, share all the information that we have, and of course we are ready to get the feedback from you, what additional bottlenecks we should be addressing to make sure that we have good enough environment so that our risks premiums will be lower. On second reaction is about scale. Francis, you mentioned that scale. I believe so. We are very happy. So if the risk reward will be lower, then you can compensate it with the scale. Quite obvious, but the question will be not what to do, but how to do this. What we should be doing to have this done. We are very open to have this feedback, maybe offline, even here. We'll have this feedback from you guys, maybe from other broader auditorium, to have what exactly is the bottleneck. We should understand what exactly you see as the bottleneck. Of course, we stand ready to work. As I said, we have a special task force, and the government is very open to have this feedback and make sure that we are addressing properly. From our end, what we are making sure that macro environment is very stable, and His Excellency the President of Uzbekistan is always prioritizing investment in the young talent population. This is the most important asset we have. We understand that, and thank you to the Sheikh Mansour, who once again focused on this very important asset. Regarding industry and priorities for government, of course we will be more than happy to support any initiative that will help us to take a very good place in a global value chain. But again, the question will be how. What exactly we should be doing? What exactly we should be prioritizing, and you see that it is what we are missing. Regarding the capital markets pension system, I think absolutely right, and the government is working on that. That's why we are regularly updating our benchmarks. We are pushing our SOEs, SOBs to improve their corporate governance and be present in capital markets. Again, if you are missing something, we are very, very open. Christina, regarding SACE, we are the good partners with us. Last week, actually, we did a quite good matching exercise, online virtual matching exercise with the Italian business partners. Embassy of Italy and Embassy of Uzbekistan were hosting us, and we stand ready to work together with, on this, to continue on this. Regarding the currency risk and competitiveness, of course, you know, the Uzbekistan Central Bank is inflation targeter. We believe that price stability has the absolute dominance to minimize the negative impact of most vulnerable population. And we have very ambitious plans to reduce the poverty, absolute poverty, to zero by 2030. We should prioritize price stability, and that's why, as an inflation targeter, floating, free float regime of FX is an absolute necessity. And we believe, while institutional reforms that we are doing this with our partners, including EBRD and other partners, of course, will address some bottlenecks in the institutional part and make sure that competitiveness is not depend on the FX dynamics. On investability, I think, yes, we are ready to work on this, on investability projects, but help us. That's why exactly why the government is trying to be out of the areas, sectors where the private sector has absolute advantage or comparative advantage. We stand ready to work on this as well. I think, Irakli, you said the best risk reward, and a number of my colleagues who are here mentioned that. So we are open for everyone who is here. Uzbekistan is open for business. Uzbekistan is open for investors. It's a win-win. And we will be happy to be a part of this win-win transaction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, in our sector, well, normally today I took this moderation role. Normally I'm sitting along you guys as a private equity investor, and normally we say we have to put our money where our mouth is. And so today we are signing as Alpac a 200 million euro private equity fund launched with UDFR, focused on the C6 countries. So when we were talking about these points of mobilizing capital, of investing, we are going together with the states, with our investors who have worked with us before, and bringing this capital before. As Euronews, we've been covering this story of Uzbekistan in the last few years, very successfully steps. But I want to really pick on this last message of yours. Here is a region in a world, some say a era of wars again, a era of instability. For us Europeans, we hadn't seen wars in a long time, and now we are experiencing it again on a constant basis. For the people in the Gulf who hadn't seen wars in that part of the Middle East for a very long time, Central Asia really offers a very interesting position. The geography is challenging, but it's actually that geography that gives us a certain protection, because it coincides being in the middle of very different powers, and that position in the middle. And as we heard from Yasur, you continue to be very good tradesmen and very good negotiators. Those old points that you mentioned on the value that Uzbekistan and the region bring to the investors. I wanted to thank all our participants in the panel today. I wanted to thank the audience for staying with us. We actually started with much less people. We finished with a full room, and apologize for the people who did not have a seat. We promise next time more chairs, more organization, will be more German next time, start on time, finish on time. But we finish only 6 minutes late, so that you are ready to go to your next sessions. Apologies again for the difficult start, but I think we had a very successful session. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you.